Hey everyone, here in Amplify, we are super thankful to have a diverse group of guests with very diverse opinions. Just know that not all of their perspectives align with what we believe at Stories of Anti-Semitism. And with that in mind, enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Amplify with Stories of Anti-Semitism. We're the podcast that's not a podcast because I learned that I can't say podcast and that I'm not a host because for some reason, David, the wizard behind the camera, told me I can't say any of those things. But it's only our third episode, so we're going to get this figured out. Anyway, today on Amplify, we're going to talk about a few things that are related to Israel, the church, and anti-Semitism. That's what we do here. And today we have with us Halle Motley. Halle, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's good to have you with us. We've gotten the chance to work with Halle a few times at Stories of Anti-Semitism. She's amazing. She's got an amazing story that she's going to share today. But before we get into your story, we want to know a little bit about you. And before you start telling your story and why you care so much about Israel and Jewish people, what we really want to know is what your favorite Skittle color is.
I hate to tell you, but I've never had Skittles before.
Shut up.
Yeah,
Get out of here.
absolutely.
What?
I've only had M&Ms. They're chocolate. Why would I go to a fruit thing?
So you're a kid and you come to the candy section and you just skip over Skittles for M&Ms?
Absolutely.
Every
I
time.
skip over anything for the chocolate.
How old are you?
Now,
Yes.
21.
For 21 years, you've skipped all Skittles for M&Ms.
Absolutely.
That's really impressive. Okay, well, you've learned a little bit about Halle. So tell a little bit more of your story then. How did you and your family become advocates and allies and just proponents for Israel and the Jewish people?
Yeah. I was born and raised in northern Colorado. I was born into a Christian family. I have an older brother. My parents decided to homeschool my brother and I until around high school age.
Wait,
And
everybody wants to know,
Ooh.
what's homeschooling like?
I love it. I highly recommend it to anyone.
You're super smart. You got great
Yeah.
grades. You're about to graduate CSU. So, okay. So, hey, homeschooling works, everybody.
It does. I mean, it's just me and my brother. You know, you have your competition between each other on who's going to do better on the assignment. But
Are you talking to the class?
You know, I think it was kind of equal.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
Dad was the principal. Mom was the teacher, essentially.
Fantastic.
There you go. Yeah.
Keep going with your story.
Yeah, so raised in a Christian home, the curriculum that my parents used to homeschool us was based in Christianity and the Bible. And so a lot of our curriculum was based in the Old Testament and like Jewish life and Jewish traditions and all of that kind of stuff that you see in the Old Testament. And so I grew up with a very strong understanding that Christianity came and was based from like Judaism and the Jewish people. And so I always had that understanding, like we celebrated Passover growing up a couple times just so we would have that understanding and that experience. And, you know, books we would read would be about like a Jewish shepherd and like what was his life like going to the temple and everyday things and that kind of stuff.
So you're a Christian.
Yeah.
You're a Christian kid, homeschooled, and you're learning about the ancient context of Israel. But what did you understand about modern day Israel?
I didn't understand anything. I didn't even really know that it was like where it was, that it was a modern state. I had no context whatsoever.
So, okay, question about that. Do you think most Christians are like you, where maybe we have an ancient understanding of Israel, but we don't think about modern Israel at all?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think the majority
You've
of
encountered that.
Christians, that I interact with, they understand the importance of ancient Israel and the Jewish people, and they know that the Jewish people still exist today, but they have like no context or they don't see the importance or any understanding of what modern Israel is, what's going on over there right now, and all of that. So,
Well, and it's important that you bring that point up because, at Stories of Anti-Semitism, we're working to kind of awaken Christians, get them engaged with what's going on in Israel, what's going on with rising anti-Semitism. And if you're kind of tuned out on the fact that there's a whole context for modern Israel that plays into geopolitics and a variety of things, then man, are you missing a lot. So, and that's what this podcast is about at some level, is for our Christian friends to go, oh, I didn't understand that. So I'm glad that you brought up those points. So you grew up with that kind of ancient historical idea that Israel's in the Bible, Israel's important. And then you went to Israel, right?
yes.
Talk to us about that.
So the first opportunity I had to go to Israel was like towards the end of my high school career. And then COVID happened, so I wasn't able to go. But, leading up to the original trip, there was a whole lot of like pre-coursework learning about, yes, ancient Israel, but also understanding how the ancient Israel plays into the modern Israel, all the complications with, geopolitics and the forming of the modern state of Israel and the conflicts that are going on right now, the people that live there, the culture, all of that kind of stuff. So I had no context before this, but then I had those pre-trip courses and suddenly it was like, I had to know more. I was learning so much. It was super interesting. And then my trip was canceled
Oh, because of COVID. Wow. Okay.
So then it kind of all came to an end. But January of 2023, I had the opportunity, that trip kind of restarted and I got to go for my first time.
Okay. So so this is 9 months before October 7th. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So I went and it was a really cool trip because it's designed to bring young Christians in relationship with Jewish people and with the modern state of Israel to understand the ancient. So, like walk where Jesus walked, see all those cool things, go to the temple wall, but then also understand the modern and go to the Green Line, learn about why that's important, go into the West Bank, hear from Palestinians, go down to the border of Gaza. So it was kind of it was a very broad trip because not only did we get to experience things important to my faith, but then we also got to learn about the modern significance, the importance to Jewish faith and all of that kind of stuff.
You said a couple of things that probably should be clarified. You brought up the Green Line.
Yes.
Explain what the Green Line is for our audience.
Okay, this is going to be hit or miss, but basically it's the original line. It was drawn with a green marker. There's no significance to the color or anything, but on a map when the borders of the modern state of Israel were being drawn and the land was decided between where would be essentially the Palestinian Authority, where would be the modern state of Israel. The Green Line is what was decided on.
Okay.
Essentially.
Okay. So it was the border between Israel and Palestine circa 1948.
Basically. It's kind of a rough line because also it's just on a map and it's sort of followed.
Got it. Right. If you know history at all, then yes, it's been sort of followed for the last 77 years. Okay, good. Well, we won't get into those weeds. That's a different episode for a different day. But let's talk a little bit then about what happened after you came back from your trip, because at that time, you were what, 19?
Yep.
Okay,
19.
So you're 19 years old, about to start as a freshman at CSU.
Already a freshman.
Already a freshman. Got it. Okay,
Yep.
So you come back to school at CSU, you sit down in a class, your teacher asks if anybody has been abroad, and you raise your hand and you say yes, and then what else happened?
I mean, I was really excited. I had no idea that there was controversy surrounding the modern state of Israel. I knew there was anti-Semitism, but I was like, oh, I went to Israel. I can't wait to tell you. It was the coolest thing ever. And immediately, the environment in the room shifted. And I didn't understand it. I didn't know what to think or how to decide, what caused that. But my teacher immediately was Israel, in the Middle East. And I was like, oh, yeah, right in by Jordan, Egypt, and those kind of things. And they made kind of an offhand comment about Israel oppressing the Palestinians. And then class moved on. And I was really taken aback because I was like,
you're not ready for this.
Right. I was like, well, and I was just there.
Yeah.
I had dinner with Palestinians. I had dinner with Jewish people. I had dinner mixed. That was not the case. Okay. So I was like, this is I was so confused because I had just been there, 5-10 days ago, and that was not at all what I had seen, and I had seen a lot.
And you hadn't seen anything that would have even indicated that maybe there's an issue going on here, a battle between Palestinians and Israelis. You didn't see any indication of that anywhere that you went in Israel.
I mean, I think when we went to the border of Gaza, there was clearly a tension because, we were learning about we stayed in a kibbutz, Kfar Aza on the border. And we were learning about here's the bomb shelter. Let's do a practice run because we have 7 seconds to get to the bomb shelter. Wow. So I knew that there was something, but I was it's not in Israel.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And they didn't really fill in the dots for you on the trip. And so you're just, you get to class.
Yeah.
This happens and you're scratching your head going, what just happened here?
Yeah.
I kicked a hornet's nest.
Very much. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so that happens, I mean,
That's
did you start?
October 7th.
Right. And how did you get your questions answered about why that was happening?
Well, initially I was like, maybe it was just like a one-off thing, like it's
Okay.
the first day of school, like, and I knew the department I was in had a history of being anti-Semitic, but I didn't quite connect the dots yet, and very anti-Christian. So I was kind of like, I don't know, we'll see what happens. And I kind of just was like, oh wait, and I'll
You're given the
Fine.
benefit of the doubt.
exactly,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I really liked the teacher. The techniques that he was teaching were incredible, so I was very excited.
Okay.
But then as time went on, for one of my first projects, I wanted to do like a piece or a study on one of the churches in Israel and the ceiling and like the way, like the history behind the art in
Yeah.
that church. And so I come to class, I have my paintings, I have my research, and my teacher comes and like wants to talk to me about like, oh, like, what are you doing? As soon as he hears that it was Israel, he walked away and did not talk to me for the rest of the class.
Just like a child, like just walks away.
Yeah, like did not talk to me about my project, did not talk to me about when it was due. And pretty much from then on, I got like the cold shoulder. I got no help in class. Sometimes I would get emails that were, like alluding to like my support or my faith as a Christian, my support of Israel and the fact that I was there and that I was an oppressor and all this stuff. And
Oh, hold on.
yeah.
That you were an oppressor.
Yes.
You actually
Because
got,
I went there.
and you were told that by your professor.
Yeah.
Wow. And he doesn't know you. He's never had any
Never met
interaction.
him until that first day of class.
And so he just labels you as an oppressor because you've been to Israel.
Yeah.
Unreal. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So this is all pre-October 7th.
Yeah, October 7th.
Okay. And so other than that, is there anything else pre-October 7th that's kind of part of your story that you want to share?
I think I would just say that I was pretty confused by this professor and everything that was happening. And like as the semester went on, it got complicated because he was a professor and his wife was the head of the department. So I couldn't report anything that was going on to the head because it was his wife, and his wife was there on that first day of class. So like it was a very weird situation where I didn't know what to do.
Well, and it feels severe enough to you that you feel like, hey, somebody needs to know about this, but you realize, oh, if the spouse is the head of the department, I'm hamstrung. I don't have anyone to tell. Okay.
And when my grades started dropping, I was like, okay, I clearly need to figure something out. And around that time, my professor basically made it clear to me that I could either progress in the department, and he would make sure I would basically fail, or I could transfer out. And so that's kind of when I decided that I would change my major because it wasn't worth it to me to change my convictions or what I, wanted to do or talk about or my faith. And so, yeah, I decided to switch.
Wow.
Concentration.
Amazing. So you dug in your heels.
Yeah.
And that's really the part that I think I want to kind of amplify. I'll use that word today. That Halle Motley didn't say, man, I'll just tone down the Israel thing. I'll, make sure in class at least that it doesn't come out, to appease my teacher because I want to have this, I want to have a good grade in this class, or I need this major. You just switched majors. Yeah. So really you're, let's call it what it is. You're being persecuted. It's funny that people call you an oppressor. You were actually being oppressed in that situation. Yes. And so that happened to you. And again, this is all still before October 7th.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it. So number one, I'll give you two questions and you can just talk. Why did you dig in your heels? Why was that conviction so important to you that you said, you know what? I'll retain my convictions and move on from this teacher in this class?
I think there's probably a few answers to that. The first one is just like I'm kind of a stubborn, passionate person. My parents raised me that way. I'm very much like my dad. He will, dig in his heels and stand up for what he believes in. And when I was a kid, we had foster kids in our home, and I think that plays into a lot of why I'm like so strong about standing up against the anti-Semitism. And it's a different kind of hate, but I got to hear their stories, from a little boy, and he's no longer with his family, and just hearing what he went through. And I remember feeling so helpless because I was a kid. And I remember being like, I don't ever want to let anyone, no matter who they are, be helpless and not have a voice like this. And so I think that really guided a lot of like who I was. And then Israel, basically, like I went to Israel and I learned about modern anti-Israel, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, all of that. And it felt kind of like a repeat of that, where, people in Israel, there's so much hate and misinformation, and they don't have a voice or a platform that they can stand up for like the truth. And I had just been there and I was like, I know that's the truth, and I'm not going to, tailor the truth to fit his narrative. And so I wanted to, represent it accurately and represent it well. And, Israel's not perfect, but it's also not what these people are saying.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that's probably the main one. And then the other one is just my faith. I mean, Jesus teaches to love everyone and to pray for people. And I think, growing up, like the biggest injustice, in my opinion, that ever happened was the crucifixion of Jesus. And if we're supposed to represent a just and good and loving God who experienced this, then I think it's our duty in some sense to prevent that from any injustice from happening to anyone.
That's great. Okay, we're going to derail here from our outline for just a second, because you made a couple of huge statements there. But I think some who maybe are on the other side of the issues that we stand up for and against, they might say, well, what about the injustice of Gazans, right? What about the injustice against Palestinians? What would you say to those people?
I would say a couple things. I would say one, like as a Christian, I think any injustice, whether it's, Israel or Palestinians, is wrong. And I think we should care about that, and our hearts should break for every innocent Palestinian who's killed. I also think, this is kind of a sad answer, but it's war. And tragedy happens in war, but that, there's a quote, and I can't remember who said it, but war is always wrong, but some things are worse. And so
That's a good quote.
Like, war is horrible.
Yeah.
But, October 7th and allowing October 7th happen repeatedly is worse. And I would also say that, yeah, Israel's messed up and there's good and bad in Israel, but on a whole, the IDF works to preserve life in this war. They work to help the civilians. It's just a very complicated war. I mean, just the other day, there was a story about Hamas basically sending out, I believe he was like a 5-year-old boy out of Gaza into like an IDF like outpost in attempts to like disorient and distract. And, if you're following the anti-Israel narrative, you would assume that something horrible happened to that kid. But instead, like, they gave him a doctor's checkup, they gave him food, they gave him shoes, and then they walked him back home. And so I think that is like, on a whole, what the IDF strives to do. And yeah, I mean, it's war, so it's heartbreaking for Palestinians to be.
That's a good example.
Lost.
That's great. Okay, that was a good bunny trail. Just to bring it back though, let's talk about what happened to you in college post October 7th.
Yeah. So by the time October 7th came, I had switched out of my major and I felt like things were going well. I was like, okay, like, yeah, there's clearly still some weirdness in this department, but like, I'm not in that major. It's going to be fine. And then October 7th happened. And I remember just feeling so helpless because one of the villages that was impacted the most was the village I had stayed in.
Kafar
Yeah. And so I remember, seeing as the news reports came out and we began to learn more and more, like seeing the house I had sat on the porch at and it was destroyed. And I remember just felt so helpless. Like I was like, what can I do? But there's, I felt like there was nothing I could do here, but I had to do something. And so I just began praying that the Lord would give me an opportunity and use my voice to help Israel and help the Jewish people and make a change. And within a few days after that, I ended up at a conference for anti-Semitism, and it just kind of steamrolled like that. But as I began doing this, my school life changed because I became more vocal than I had ever been before. I put on a pin on my backpack that says I'm a proud Zionist and like I support the state of Israel. And so like I just was, and I bought a Jewish star because I was like, I want to wear something that, if my Jewish friends can't hide their Jewish identity, then I want to stand with them. And like, this is a tangible way for me to do that.
Yeah, like a symbol of solidarity or something.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like I was doing all this stuff and sort of pretty quickly, I noticed not from my professor, thankfully, but from other students. Like they wouldn't talk to me anymore, and I wasn't quite sure what it was from. But then in classes, I would in a history class, I would write about Israel, and I would get like a failing grade because it was about Israel. Or like, walking on the plaza when we began to get encampments on our campus. I was wearing a Jewish star, and, I had a rock thrown at me.
Wow.
So it kind of was just like a steamer of those kind of events. And it just made me more clear that I was doing the right thing and I needed to keep doing what I was doing.
Well, the thing that strikes me, we'll bring this up a lot in Amplify in our podcast. It's okay to say podcast, I guess, sometimes. But people hated you right away because you said, I'm a Zionist. So it's like all of the sudden, what's attached to you for standing with Israel is hatred.
Yeah.
You're a bad person. I've been called at a Jewish conference. I was called a baby killer and a murderer. I mean, did you hear some of that?
Yeah, I had a professor call me a Nazi. And, and it was interesting because they didn't even know that much about me. So like it was, I hadn't really been in their class, and I don't know how they would have known really, other than like that I wore a Jewish star, that I was supporting Israel, because I didn't really interact with them.
Yeah.
So clearly somehow they figured it out. I don't really know. But yeah, I've been called a Nazi. I've been called a baby killer. I've been called an oppressor, a white supremacist, all of the things that you could.
Just because people knew from the star, or because you had gone to Israel or you'd spoken out, and just because of that.
It was really interesting because people I had known for years also switched. So like someone I had known since high school, and we were really good friends and all this stuff, they switched and started calling me a Nazi, and they knew me well. And so that was, and since then, actually, it's really beautiful. We've been able to sort of resolve that. And yes, we both disagree, but still be friends and respectful. But at the time, it was really hard because, I felt like not only were my secular friends turning, but some of my Christian friends were turning. And I was like, I never would have expected it from the Christian community.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that's some of what we're seeing in the last 18 months that is so shocking, is either Christians who are pretty silent, pretty disengaged, and I think sometimes the silence of Christians who say they are engaged and they do care, that how are their Jewish friends ever supposed to know?
Right.
Right? But at the same time, we do see some Christian students, I think especially, they're headed the other direction to an anti-Israel, maybe even a hateful sort of perspective on Israel, even on you, which both you and I know, hey, that's pretty. What's the word?
Normal.
Well, the opposite of normal, if you compare it to what Christianity calls us to, right?
Yes, exactly.
So paradoxical, that's what I was going to say. It's paradoxical to Christianity, and that's really concerning. So talk a little bit about, you're on campus. You've obviously got some friends who stand with Israel, some friends who don't. What do you say? What do you say to some of these kids who are saying, you're awful, you're a baby killer, you shouldn't be a Zionist? Are you able to get through to them at all?
It depends, I think. Initially, when it first started happening, I was not prepared. I did not know what to say other than like, I'm not. I was like, I don't know how else to address this. But now that I've gone through it so many times, I feel like I'm more prepared. And I think it depends on the situation. If someone is coming at me and screaming and yelling all this stuff, I'm probably not going to get through to them. But maybe the people watching, they'll at least hear my side of the story. And so I think it's also really important. I think the, pro-Israel community is really good at giving facts, countering misinformation with facts. But we also have to show the emotional side. And I think that's something that's important, because facts are important, but they can also be irrelevant. You have to change someone's heart. And so like when I'm talking to someone, I try to share personal experiences and just be like, post October 7th, I would try to share like about Kfar Aza and the village I stayed in and the family I stayed with who is now killed by Hamas. And so I tried to share those personal stories, and I think that's most effective, because when you share like such a personal, tangible story, especially with, co-students, they say these things, but they don't believe you're like malicious and so by sharing a personal story, maybe you can have them think differently about it.
That's so good. I love that. I mean, that's why we do stories of anti-Semitism, because the issue is blown up into some big geopolitical problem that's very polarized. And so you either have to be on one side or the other and kind of hate the other side. We want to pull the conversation out of that realm and down to people, to human beings, dialoguing. And that's why we like to share stories like yours. So it's really good. I love that you're doing that. So you actively do that on campus.
Yes.
Right? And you've worked with a few different organizations. So talk about Israel 365, and I think Stand With Us also, and just your experience with them. Why did you start working with them? And I guess the rewards of it. Like what did you feel like you got out of working with them?
Yeah. So my first trip that I went to Israel was with a group called Passages. And after October 7th, I got to go to a couple Passages conferences, and that's kind of how I began speaking out on social media and all that kind of stuff. And Israel 365 is aware of Passages and aware of like their students. And the person who basically like recruits people to come on a trip with Israel 365 was best friends with someone who led a conference I was at. So she reached out to me over social media and was like, hey, I've heard a lot about you. I've seen all the work you're doing, especially on social media. Would you be interested in coming to Israel post October 7th? And initially I was like, this is a scam. I'm not going to reply. But after verifying, I knew it was real. And so I looked into the company, and I really just loved it from the beginning because it's a Jewish organization that's all about building the bridges between Jews and Christians. And Passages is a Christian organization, which is wonderful. But to see, I wanted to see Israel through a Jewish person's eyes, and like what they see as important, and like how they are doing during this conflict and all of that. And so I decided, why not? It would be a great experience. And so post October 7th in May of 2024,
Okay.
I went back to Israel.
Wow. So that's 6-7 months later after the attack. Okay.
Yeah. It was
Probably still pretty tense there. Probably a lot of people
It was right around
sad.
when Iran attacked with
right.
ballistic missiles.
Okay.
So it was,
Okay.
Yeah, definitely still very tense.
Yeah.
War is still happening.
Okay.
Um,
And while you're there, what did you learn? What did you see? What did they want you to experience?
yeah. So I think learned so much, but one of the things that stood out to me the most is we went to the hospitals where people from October 7th were recovering, where soldiers were recovering. And, as soon as you walk in, first of all, the environment is just so beautiful. People are always like happy and joyful, which is crazy to me when it's like you're in a war-torn country, and like, I'm looking at this man who both his legs were just blown off, and he's joyful. And I was like, that's incredible. Like, how beautiful. And so hearing the stories of, there was this couple that were in a bomb shelter at the Nova Festival, and like a grenade was thrown in, and they survived. They both lost their legs. But like hearing their story, and like just the joy they had and the love they had for Israel still, even though October 7th happened. And I would talk to Jewish people, Muslim people, Arabs, every kind of person who was in the hospital because they loved Israel or they were serving Israel and they loved Israel.
Wow.
And so like,
When you say Muslims and Arabs, are you talking about Muslims and Arabs that served in the IDF?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Again, you're good at controversial statements. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, one of probably like the most distinct a story to me is I was talking to a Muslim police officer from the Nova Festival. And he survived, and he told his story. And basically on October 7th, he is a Muslim, and he is Palestinian. And when Hamas came in and started slaughtering people, he tried to be like, no, like I'm one of you guys, like basically don't kill me. And when he wouldn't give up where the Jewish people were that he helped get to safety or he helped hide, then they basically turned on him because they viewed him as a traitor, basically. And no longer did his, Palestinian identity or the shared faith mean anything because he protected Jewish people.
Wow. Okay. So you're seeing these things. Israel 365 is leading the trip.
Yeah.
As you're having these experiences, did you feel at all like you're being propagandized? Did you feel like they're trying to get you to believe a certain narrative or turn you against Gazans?
No.
Okay.
That's just a short answer. I actually think they worked to really show us the complications on both sides. And like, obviously they're a pro-Israel organization, but they were showing us like things like, we went down to the border of Gaza and like hearing soldier stories, and then sitting with Palestinians who, our Jewish people friends didn't go with us into these areas because they can't, and hearing their stories. And so I actually think that Israel 365 worked really hard to give us a very full picture and then let us decide what our opinion was, basically.
That's great.
And it was a mixed group of people. I mean, some people, everyone was pro-Israel, but some people believe in a two-state solution. Some people don't. So it's not like you had to believe one thing. It was just like a pro-Israel group.
And it's Israel. Diversity of opinions is normal. Independent
Very
thinking,
much.
critical thinking is normal.
Very
They welcome that. That's wonderful. Good. Okay. So you worked for Israel 365. Well, you went on a trip with them, and then you came back to the States. And since then, you kind of continued to advocate. You've continued to keep your heels dug in. Talk a little bit about what you've been doing in the last 18 months.
Yeah. So after coming back from that trip with Israel 365, I had talked a little bit about like what was going on in downtown Fort Collins and like what was going on campus, and
Which is protests, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Anything specific about those that you want to bring up?
I think so. I worked at a jewelry store in downtown Fort Collins at the time, and I remember, every day from like January till end of April of 2024, there was a protest, and it was a group of people walking, screaming, and I remember like I think it's interesting how aggressive they were, like banging on the glass of businesses that maybe had nothing to do. Well, not maybe. They had nothing to do with Israel. You had no idea whether the people inside were pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian, or, where they stood on that spectrum. And so I just remember like they were so aggressive and it was so strong. And, one day, I had like a sweatshirt on that said, "Keep God's land" on the back with like the map of Israel. And I remember I was in the store. They didn't come in, but they walked by and they saw it and they got very angry. And that, like it got more intense after that.
Okay.
So,
it's interesting that you bring that up, because I think about that often, that what we see in the protests is it feels intense. It's emotionally intense. It feels hateful. It feels aggressive and threatening. And I think that it's hard for me to watch those protests, watch those actions, and then say to myself, wow, they seem really pro-Palestinian. They seem really filled with love and concern for a people. They really seem angry with somebody else, right? And so I often challenge, are you pro-Palestinian or are you anti-Israel or anti-Zionist? Which one is it? Because it feels more anti-something than pro-something.
I agree 100%.
Okay. I'm glad we agree.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's bring it in for landing. A couple of questions that I want to ask you. I've heard this statement said several times, that if you wonder what you would have done in 1930s Germany, it's whatever you're doing right now. So that's an intense statement. I'm not trying to qualify it or say I stand by that 100%. But times are serious as we talk about global anti-Semitism. And so my question to you is, do you think it really is that intense? And if it is, what's the right response from non-Jews?
I personally do think it's that intense. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago with Stand With Us, and I was hearing Jewish people's stories from around the world. And I was hearing about these Jewish people from the Netherlands, and they were talking like, no, they can't wear a kippah outside. They can't show any, they can't present themselves as Jewish in any way. And like, it was, I remember thinking about the irony in one of their stories is that they went around polishing the stumbling blocks, which are like these placards that are placed in the streets that are reminders of the Holocaust and of people that were arrested on those spots. And like the irony of them going around and polishing those stones, yet hiding their Jewish identity because it's unsafe. And I just that's such a parallel to what it was like for, Jewish people in the Netherlands pre-World War II and during World War II. So I do think it's that. I think it's that intense. I think that, it varies depending on where you are. I think there's some areas where it is less intense,
Mhm.
but I do think in those areas you have to be prepared because it is going to be that intense.
Right. I mean, we live in Colorado, a fairly
Pretty
uh,
neutral.
toned down state, I think, compared to others. But even still, our Jewish friends here, while they're not maybe nervous to walk down the street, excuse me, with their Star of David necklace on, they're not sure how long that's going to last.
Exactly.
Right? They worry about their children at college. You've got Jewish friends on campus that have experienced some things. And so worry is steadily increasing. I think the statistic is well over half of the Jewish people in America are finding ways to conceal their Jewish identity, right? Because they don't want to be hurt. They don't want to be attacked, harassed, threatened, whatever. So yeah, that's pretty that's pretty similar to 1930s Germany. It reminds me of The Hiding Place,
Exactly.
the book by Corrie ten Boom, and there's the portion where her brother goes from the Netherlands to Germany, and when he comes back, he says, "Man, it's very different there. Like they don't even like the old people. They're treating old people without respect there." I'll never forget reading that part of the book. And so the climate had changed, and there was a devaluing of life. There was greater hostility and unrest within the culture, and I think we're seeing, at the very least, if we're not trying to be too dramatic, we're at least seeing parallels to that.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're seeing similar actions. Is it at the same pitch, at the same level as what we were seeing in 1930s Germany? Maybe not, but we're getting closer.
It's close.
Right? Okay. So we're living in an intense time. Heroes are made in times like this, right? But I think the heroes that we love the most are the heroes that said, you know what, I just responded to what was going on in my time. I wanted to do the right thing. I think Corrie ten Boom actually said something like that. I forget the exact quote. So for you, for this podcast, what we're trying to do here is actually call some of those people out. We want to call people to action. Now's not a time to be silent. So I think there's two categories of Christians in our audience. I think there's the ones who are kind of raring to go, and they're saying, man, tell me what to do and I'll do it. First, what would you say to those people who are just saying, I just don't know what to do, but I got all kinds of energy?
Yeah, I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think probably the first thing I would say, get involved with organizations where you like Stories of Anti-Semitism or Israel 365, where you can, be educated. And that this doesn't necessarily mean going to Israel, but if you do, I highly recommend.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. I think it completely changes your worldview and how you address things in this war and conflict. But then I would also just say, go up, find a Jewish person, go talk to them, ask how they're doing, and then ask how you can help. What can you do? If you're a student on campus, go to your Halle or Chabad, because they're facing, budget cuts, anti-Semitism, attacks, threats, all of this kind of thing, and they often feel alone. And I think if you just show up and you say, hey, I'm a Christian, I'm an ally, I want to help you guys, put me to work. What do you need? Sometimes it may be nothing. If they're like, hey, we don't need anything, that's okay, that's great. But you're there, and you keep showing up for that kind of thing.
I feel like that encouragement has been huge. That's probably the thing that has been some of the greatest impact we've seen, where our Jewish friends are saying, hey, we're just glad to know there's somebody that's not Jewish that's actually speaking up, because that history has shown us whenever Jewish people are being attacked, it's only Jewish people who are speaking out. Nobody else is speaking out for them. And so we do need our Christian audience to do that. The way I like to say it is, it's small things. The small things really do go the longest way. I remember the rabbi calling me and saying, man, it's people from your community, from the Christian community, that are calling and bringing cards and flowers. We're so touched by that. Then I thought, well, that's such a small thing. It feels almost like nothing.
Yeah, you're like, what am I really doing? But you're doing a lot.
Right. Yes, for our Jewish friends. So for those folks, do small things, do big things, get involved. There are organizations, we love our Israeli American Council. We love our Stand With Us, our Jewish National Fund, our Hillel groups. And we've loved connecting with them, and it's far too easy.
Right, exactly.
And so it's easy for anybody, I think, as long as you're legitimately caring.
Yeah. Go to a Shabbat dinner with your Hillel if you're a student.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that could be done on campus or in the community.
Exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful things to do. Okay. So we also have the Christian who maybe they're not against Israel, but they're kind of on the fence. They're feeling nervous. They have questions. What do you say to them? What do they need to know to educate themselves? Where can they get answers?
I think it It kind of depends on what they're questioning. I think if you're struggling with like the innocent Palestinians, or you're struggling with that, like Palestinians' lives are being lost, I think that's a great struggle. And I think that, in this struggle, I think the best thing to do is like research. Go back to, like in Israel, there are Palestinians serving in the government and, running the banks. So whereas in Palestine or Gaza, like Jewish people are killed or they're hostage held underground. And so I think if you're struggling with that, like if you're struggling with what Israel's doing, looking at those two sides, Israel's the only option where a Palestinian and a Jew can live side by side. So then hold Israel accountable rather than, attacking Israel. Fight for Israel to be better. If that is your struggle, fight for Israel to be better, fight for it to be, a better place and have Palestinian representation, but don't attack Israel because the other option is far worse.
Yeah.
So I'd say that. And then I think if you're worried about it being political, because I think I hear that a lot, like, oh, it's
especially with our Christian audience. I think Christians kind of go, oh, we don't, especially pastors. We don't want to, we don't want to step into politics here.
Yeah.
How do we steer clear of politics?
Yeah.
Which is really difficult because this issue is very political.
Yeah. I would say a couple things. Yes, it is a political issue, but I think it's not as it's not a bi-party, Democrat or Republican issue. Mm-hmm. It's more just politically tense. Mm-hmm. And so I think for when I think of pastors that are nervous about this, and that's a fair, to be nervous about that, but go back to your Bible. Mm-hmm. Jesus stood up for what was right, no matter how people reacted, even if it was his followers, right? Paul was thrown into prison. I think if you're worried about, rocking the boat or changing things, I think you need to go back to your Bible because it's important as a Christian to stand for what you believe is biblical and what you believe is right, no matter what the effects are.
Yeah.
No matter what is going to happen. And it's not a political issue. And I mean, it is, but it's not. I mean, people's lives are being lost. People are screaming death to the Jews in the streets. That is not a political issue. That's a human issue.
Good. That's what I was going to say if you didn't say it. I'm glad you said it. Yeah, I mean, we're saying so many things here that people have a rebuttal for.
Right.
And, even to be fair, I think for our Jewish audience, they're going, man, you guys talk about the Bible a lot. Like, we're so Christian, we're not trying to make this a religious podcast per se. But I think for our Christian allies and friends out there who are looking to stand, the Bible's not so bad. Right. And you keep bringing up the fact that, look, what we're really after is sort of this biblical justice and this biblical concept of mercy and kindness and love for our neighbor. And I think most people, Christian or not, go, yeah, isn't that what the Bible's supposed to say anyway? And so I think we're calling Christians to be what Jesus, what the Bible calls us to be, Old Testament or New. We can, even if people around us don't like Christianity per se, it should be that love should have some impact on somebody. And it's funny because, when we go to college campuses, we do talk to students sometimes who would say they're pro-Palestinian. Usually we're not heated. Yeah. Usually we have very civil conversation.
Most of the time.
Right. And you're experiencing that too. And just by treating people like human beings, treating people with respect, we can actually get them to think critically and suddenly realize, you know what, maybe I don't have all the answers here. Maybe I've misinterpreted. Maybe I've heard some things that weren't actually correct. And so maybe I need to ask more questions rather than just believe this one-sided narrative that I hear about Israel, about Jewish people. And we've had some luck with that. I think we've had a few kids that have walked away after conversations on campus saying, I feel like I learned something today. Yeah. I feel like you calmed me down. You got me off the ledge a little bit.
Exactly.
Right. And I think that's important. And I think that's important for our Christian audience to understand is where the media makes everything look super intense and super polarized. And maybe Christians are fearful thinking, I don't want to talk to somebody who's going to yell at me or maybe knows the facts better than me. We probably need to realize that the majority of people are not very clear on the facts, don't know very many of the facts, and if you treat them with respect and get them to think critically, you're probably doing them a lot of good.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Any final words before we wrap up?
No, I don't
None.
think so. No.
Perfect. Well, this has been a fantastic podcast. I mean, it's only our 3rd episode, and I think we're already going pretty deep here. But we want to thank you for your time. Thanks for showing up, and thank you for digging in your heels and not being silent. You know, that's our message that we want to make real clear to our Christian allies out there, and you have embodied it so well.
Of course.
So thanks so
for
much.
having me.
Absolutely.